To proclaim my nationality, I got a birthright inheritance. Europeans don't want you to have an actuality. I'm an everlasting spirit personality, man. Soon to control elements whenever I balance my span. Nationality is precious for your national redemption.
Thank you for tuning into WDRB Media, the voice of the community, the only station giving you double the information and inspiration. You are listening to What is Your Nationality? And I'm your host, Shem L. I'm the author of several books, including Land of the Free, which you can purchase on my website, sheml.com. That's SHEM-EL.com. Also, we'd like to make a couple of announcements. One, be on the lookout for our upcoming first social and economic conference in Durham, North Carolina. We are narrowing in on the venue and time. We have all of our speakers on deck, so get it tuned and get ready to attend. You are all welcome, and we will keep you updated as details unravel. Also, would like to give a quick shout out to the Haiti Heritage Center, which is doing their annual Kwanzaa celebration. They have their annual Kwanzaa celebration every year, and you can definitely check it out. It's going to be a great time. There's definitely for the celebration, just to let you know, they kick off a week-long Kwanzaa set of festivities in Durham. And, of course, Kwanzaa is observed from December 26th to January 1st. And so at the time, you will see on the 26th, there will be scheduled to have an event with all of the festivities. And so be sure to check out haiti.org for more information on that. So, with that said, I will get to the topic of today, and I call this topic the new Dred Scott. The new Dred Scott. Some of you may have heard the term called the new Jim Crow, referring to the prison system. The term the new Jim Crow is actually based on a particular book that came out, I believe by Michelle Alexander, who is also one of the people who was interviewed on the Hidden Colors series. If you have not watched Hidden Colors, you definitely should tune into that series. My favorite is the first part 1, and also I love part 4 as well. But Michelle Alexander, who's the author of the book called The New Jim Crow, Mass Incarceration, right, in the age of color blindness, she coined that phrase, and I'm going to coin this particular episode the new Dred Scott, and you'll see why in a moment. So, just to give you some insight, this is inspired by a recent article that came out not too long ago, where an exonerated Missouri man was released from prison after 43 years. He was sentenced to life in prison for a murder he did not commit, a triple homicide to be exact, killing of 3 people. Fortunately, due to the Midwest Innocence Project, he was able to be exonerated, to be released from prison. Actually, there was a witness who recanted their testimony before they passed away. And basically, long story short, he was released after 43 years. 43 years, which he should never have done in the first place. He should have never served those 33 years in prison to begin with. But the good thing is that he's free now. The interesting thing about this Missouri man is that even though the state of Missouri held him captive for 43 years, according to Missouri law, he is ineligible for any compensation from the state. You heard it. The state of Missouri will not pay him a dime for wrongfully convicting and incarcerating him. And it's made news because there was such support of the man. Donors ended up raising more than $1.4 million on his GoFundMe, which is a great thing, but that should have been paid by the state. So that leads us to the question about why is it that this man, who's identified and classified as Negro, Black, colored, African American, why he is not eligible? Not that he didn't receive it. They said he's not eligible for compensation from the state, even though they were in the wrong. So we're going to dive into that. But before we do, we're going to take a brief pause for the cause. However, when we come back, we will continue our discussion. You are listening to What is Your Nationality? And I'm your host, Shem L. You're tuned into WDRB Media, the voice of the community, the only station giving you double the information and inspiration. We'll be right back after the break. Hayti Kwanzaa at the Hayti Heritage Center in Durham, North Carolina. Hayti Kwanzaa kicks off the week-long Kwanzaa festivities in the Raleigh-Durham area. Kwanzaa is a 7-day celebration based on Nguzo Saba, which is the 7 principles. And at the Hayti Heritage Center, there will be a host of events and activities for children as well as adults beginning on December 26th. Be sure to be there at the Hayti Heritage Center, where you will have a host of community activists and community groups such as Uplifting Humanity. Check us out at the Hayti Heritage Center. Go to hayti.org for more details. Welcome back to WDRB Media, the voice of the community, and those streaming live through free TuneIn radio app and through iHeartRadio. You are listening to What is Your Nationality? And I am your host, Shem L. I'm the author of several books, including What is the Higher Self, which you can purchase on my website, sheml.com. That's SHEM-EL.com. Also, to give you some announcements, be on the lookout for the upcoming 2022 first of its kind social and economic conference taking place in Durham, North Carolina. I will be a chairman of that conference. We have all the speakers lined up, and we're wrapping up on securing the venue and specific day and time. So be on the lookout for that. Again, that's the first social and economic conference in North Carolina. You are all welcome to attend. We'll keep you posted on the updates. Also, Hayti Heritage Center is scheduled to have a Kwanzaa event. They have their annual Hayti Kwanzaa event. As you know, Kwanzaa is a week-long, 7-day celebration dealing with Nguzo Saba, the 7 principles that deals is considered an African-American holiday, and it deals with the principles that tie back to our ancient mothers and fathers, our ancestors. And this will actually take place. Kwanzaa begins on the 26th, and it continues on through January 1st. So they're going to have a host of activities for the 26th. It should be scheduled for. Again, go to hatetide.org for more details and reach out to them. Also like to also put into that input that my nonprofit, Uplifting Humanity, will be active during the Kwanzaa season as well, participating, supporting with these activities in the Raleigh-Durham area. So I just wanted to let that be known. So we're really doing this to uplift falling humanity, uplift our people. That's the purpose of this show. What is your nationality? To inform you, to educate you, as well as do a little bit of entertaining. But with that, let's get back to our discussion. As I was mentioning, the topic of the show, the title of this show is The New Dred Scott. Taking a little spin off of the term The New Jim Crow, which is from a book written by Michelle Alexander. And this is inspired by an article. And I will actually go to read this article. This article from is actually from the Business Insider, interestingly enough. But basically, just to recap, a Missouri man, okay, actually the title of it says, an exonerated Missouri man who was released from prison after 43 years isn't eligible for compensation from the state. Donors have now raised over $1.4 million on GoFundMe. So, just to give a recap, there's a man by the name of Kevin Strickland. You can look him up online. There's been a lot of talk about him. He was recently released from prison after spending 43 years incarcerated for a crime he did not commit. He was exonerated. However, under Missouri law, he's not eligible for compensation, supposedly because he was exonerated without DNA evidence. However, he spent 43 years in prison. So the chances of there being DNA evidence, strong DNA evidence, to exonerate a man who spent 43 years in prison is slim to none. So as a result, a GoFundMe was set up, campaign was set up, and they were able to successfully raise over $1.4 million on his behalf. So I'll read the article. It says, Kevin Strickland left a Missouri prison on Tuesday after being exonerated in a 1978 triple murder. But under Missouri law, he was ineligible for compensation from the state despite spending 43 years behind bars for a crime he did not commit. However, donations have been pouring in from supporters after the Midwest Innocence Project set up a GoFundMe campaign to help Strickland, who was taken into custody when he was just 18 years old, begin a new life, right? So this is basically to help Kevin Strickland begin a new life outside of prison. As of Saturday afternoon, the campaign had raised over $1.4 million from 25,000 donations. Tricia Rojo Bushnell, the attorney representing Strickland and the executive director of the Midwest Innocence Project, told the Washington Post on Friday that individuals from around the globe have sought to aid her client. Okay? So Strickland does not have retirement savings or a work history to obtain Social Security benefits as a result of his wrongful conviction. And Missouri only permits compensation from the state if an individual's innocence is proven as a result of DNA testing. Quote, it's a very small minority of people who receive that, end quote. Bushnell told the newspaper. She continued to say, quote, the vast majority of folks who are exonerated through non-DNA evidence, and the vast majority of crimes do not involve DNA at all. So what we see in Missouri is folks get home and they are provided nothing, end quote. Goes on to say, quote, he's 62 years old with physical problems. He's not going to be able to work in the way that many other folks coming home would. This has got to be something to sustain him, end quote, she added. Strickland was released from jail after Judge James Welsh ruled that the conviction should be vacated, as no physical evidence linked him to the crime. Quote, under these unique circumstances, the court's confidence in Strickland's convictions is so undermined that it cannot stand, and the judgment of conviction must be set aside, end quote. The judge wrote in ordering Strickland's immediate release, according to the Associated Press. Jackson County prosecutor Gene Peters Baker, who supported Strickland's exoneration, swiftly moved to dismiss the criminal charges against him in order to facilitate his release. However, despite the concentrated push for Strickland's release after the court testimony unraveled, two of the state's top office holders offered a different view of the case. Republican Governor Mike Parson, who in June said that the pardon for Strickland was not a quote-unquote priority, as there were other clemency cases that needed to be reviewed, tweeted a basic statement about the ruling. He wrote, quote, the court has made its decision, we respect the decision, and the Department of Corrections will proceed with Mr. Strickland's release immediately, end quote. Attorney General Eric Schmidt, who is running in the 2022 Republican primary for the Senate seat being vacated by Roy Blunt, previously maintained that Strickland was guilty of the crimes. So, quote, in this case, we defended the rule of law and the decision that a jury of Strickland's peers made after hearing all the facts of the case, end quote. A Schmidt spokesman said in a statement. Goes on to say, quote, the court has spoken, no further action will be taken in this matter, end quote. Despite family members presenting alibis for Strickland, along with one of the admitted killers stating that Strickland was not at the scene when the three victims, Sherry Black, age 22, Larry Ingram, age 21, and Johnny Walker, age 20, were murdered, he was still convicted and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole for 50 years. The case had previously been constructed around the testimony of a witness who recanted her testimony and has since died, according to the Associated Press. Strickland has always maintained his innocence and told a group of reporters that he learned of the court's decision while watching television, with inmates cheering at the news of his impending release. Quote, I'm not necessarily angry. It's a lot. I think I've created emotions that you all don't know about just yet. Joy, sorrow, fear. I'm trying to figure out how to put them together, end quote. He told his reporters as he left the Western Missouri Correctional Center. After Strickland's release, the first thing he did was visit his mother's grave. And that is the article from Business Insider. Okay. Now, just a couple of things I want to just kind of highlight. One of the things that I found that was very interesting, what this article doesn't say is that one of the things that happened after his release is that they invited him to turn the switch on for a giant Christmas tree, right? The mayor of the city invited him to do that. Okay, so he's being celebrated in the city and he gets to do that. He's not being compensated by the government, however. The other thing that struck me was just basically, in essence, what it's saying here is that this man who's 62 years old with physical problems, he can't really walk. If you see him, if you see video of him or pictures of him, he's usually in a wheelchair. He's had several strokes, things of that nature. His health is deteriorated immensely. So, and of course, being that he's locked up, you know, he doesn't have retirement, he doesn't have 401, you know, he was basically forced into involuntary servitude. And I'm going to get into that in a moment. But with all of that, the state of Missouri is saying because there was no DNA evidence after 43 years, of course there's none. However, they said there was no physical evidence. That should equate to hold the same weight as any DNA testing. The lack of DNA at a crime scene would equate to DNA exonerating a person. If you follow what I'm saying, meaning that there can't be any DNA at the scene if he's not there. But you know, they played that trick with the law, and of course, you notice that it's a political thing in reference to the two particular politicians, government officials, who made their statement. They were both in the Republican Party. So we're going to dive into that. It's really, really interesting. And this goes back all the way to Dred Scott. And we're going to get into that. And that's important, too, because Missouri is the same state where Dred Scott filed a lawsuit for his freedom. So, but before we get into that, we're going to take a quick pause for the cause. And after the break, we will continue our discussion. You are tuned into WDRB Media, the voice of the community, the only station giving you double the information and inspiration. Don't go anywhere because we will be right back. Hayti Kwanzaa at the Hayti Heritage Center in Durham, North Carolina. Hayti Kwanzaa kicks off the week-long Kwanzaa festivities in the Raleigh-Durham area. Kwanzaa is a 7-day celebration based on Nguzo Saba, which is the 7 principles. And at the Hayti Heritage Center, there will be a host of events and activities for children as well as adults beginning on December 26th. Be sure to be there at the Hayti Heritage Center, where you will have a host of community activists and community groups such as Uplifting Humanity. Check us out at the Hayti Heritage Center.
Go to hayti.org for more details.
Welcome back to WDRB Media, the voice of the community, and those streaming live through free TuneIn radio app and through iHeartRadio. You are listening to What is Your Nationality? And I'm your host, Shem L. I am the author of several books, including How Many Days Are in the Circle, which you can purchase on my website, sheml.com. That's SHEM-EL.com. Also, to make a couple of announcements, we are still ready on course for the upcoming 2022 First Social and Economic Conference in Durham, North Carolina, of which I'll be a chairman for the conference. We have all the speakers lined up, and we are just wrapping up in terms of getting a secured venue and securing a date and time. So be on the lookout for that. Also, for our friendly collaborator, or I should say our friendly neighborhood Hayti Heritage Center, one of the staples in the Durham, North Carolina community. They are having their Kwanzaa celebration that they have every year. So just wanted to let you know that is a 7-day celebration, Kwanzaa, which begins on December 26th and it runs through January 1st. So with that, they are scheduled to have something on the 26th, in which they'll have a host of activities. And my particular nonprofit, Uplifting Humanity, hopefully will be working with them closely at that time. And this is all for the purpose of helping our youth, uplifting our people, and just basically getting our community back to the great state in which it needs to be. So, with that said, if you're just tuning in, we were discussing about the case of a Missouri man who was exonerated for 43 years, but is ineligible to be compensated by the state of Missouri due to certain laws pertaining to that. And this man is classified as Negro, Black, Colored, African American. He was charged with the triple homicide that took place in his area back in 1978. And the title of this episode, as I mentioned before, is The New Dred Scott. So the reason why I call it The New Dred Scott, which is a play on the term The New Jim Crow, which is the title of a book written by Michelle Alexandra, speaking about the prison system. I saw the parallel between this man here, who is from Missouri, who was locked up in Missouri, and the situation with Dred Scott. Now, why would I say the parallel? Because the 13th Amendment states that involuntary servitude is prohibited except when found guilty of a crime. And this is the case that happened with this man here, Kevin Strickland, who was incarcerated, wrongfully convicted and incarcerated for 43 years. He was basically placed under involuntary servitude because when you're in the prison system, you're basically working. They have you working for free, practically free, pennies. So you might as well call it free. So that's slavery. Make no mistake about it. It is slavery. And if you think I'm lying, watch the documentary, the Netflix documentary entitled The 13th, if it's still on Netflix. If it's not, you should be able to get it on some other platforms. But that particular documentary clearly lets you know exactly what that is. Also, watch the Hidden Color series, which has the sister Michelle Alexander speaking on that. You can actually go to YouTube and watch her lectures. She goes in great detail about um, the prison system as it relates to people who are classified as Negro, Black, Colored, and African American today. So when we get into Dred Scott, exactly what was that? And I've mentioned about this many, many times before, and I'll keep mentioning it again because it needs to be, it's not spoken about enough. The Dred Scott decision is not spoken about enough. People like to pass it off like it's not in effect. It has never been repealed, ever. Do not be mistaken. Do not be fooled when people try to tell you it was repealed by the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendment. It was not. And all you have to do is just look at today. That's prime evidence. That's clear evidence that it was not. This article that I read about with Kevin Strickland is proof of it. So in the Dred Scott versus Sanford decision in 1857, the United States Supreme Court ruled that the descendants of Africans who were Negroes of the African race who were imported into the United States and sold as slaves were not included nor intended to be included under the word citizen in the Constitution, whether emancipated or not, and remain without rights or privileges except such as those which the government might grant them. So in layman's terms, this means the descendants of Africans were deemed to be chattel property. Now, let's briefly examine a few excerpts from Chief Justice Roger B. Taney in the Dred Scott decision, who, by the way, and I have to say it now to get the point across because nationality is the order of the day, the same Chief Justice of the Supreme Court who ruled against Dred Scott ruled in favor of the inhabitants of Africa who took over the Amistad ship from the famous Amistad movie. Those brothers who caused mutiny on the ship took over the ship because they were captured, they were kidnapped to be enslaved, but they fought back. And that was a Spanish ship. That case became a Supreme Court case on the question of whether those individuals from Africa were indeed slaves and property or were they not. And it was ruled in favor of those inhabitants of Africa. It was ruled that they were indeed free men and women because they belonged to the family of nations. The term family of nations is used in that Supreme Court case. So it basically means that they had a nationality. But here, let's examine what Chief Justice Taney said in the Dred Scott case. And also we'll go into an excerpt from Justice Daniels as well in his concurring opinion. So Chief Justice Taney said, quote, "The question is simply this: can a Negro whose ancestors were imported into this country and sold as slaves become a member of the political community formed and brought into existence by the Constitution of the United States, and as such become entitled to rights and privileges and immunities guaranteed by that instrument to the citizen? It will be observed that the plea applies to that class of persons only whose ancestors were Negroes of the African race," end quote. So further along, Justice Taney said that these classes of persons were not, quote, constituent members of this sovereignty, end quote, and that they were not included, are not included, and were not intended to be included in the word citizens in the Constitution. He went on to say that, quote, on the contrary, they were at the time considered to as a subordinate and inferior class of beings, end quote. Now, a lot of people who refer to this particular case always refer to that section in the decision where it says that a black man has no rights that a white man is bound to respect. They have no rights in which a white man is bound to respect. Okay? Now, this is where it really needs to be clear. Notice in Judge Taney's statement above, he articulated, right, that I just mentioned. Notice in that statement, he articulates that the argument applies to, quote, that class of persons only whose ancestors were Negroes of the African race, end quote. Okay? So I always go to say, the key word in that phrase, Negroes of the African race, is the preposition of. Because if I say the hood of the car, I'm not referring to the whole car. If I say the trunk of the car, I'm not referring to the whole car. I'm referring to a section. So the Negroes of the African race is telling you that they did not see the Negro as being all of the African race, but a section of the African race. It's a classification which is backed up by the Negro Law of South Carolina in 1848, which gives you the definition of the word Negro as being the enslaved Africans. Not to be confused with the free inhabitants of Africa, such as Moors and Egyptians, etc. Right? So let's take a look at what Justice Daniel stated in his concurring opinion. He's quoted as saying this, quote, "Now the following are truths which a knowledge of the history of the world and particularly of own country compels us to know that the African Negro race never have been acknowledged as belonging to the family of nations, that as amongst them there never has been known or recognized by the inhabitants of other countries anything partaking of the character of nationality, civil or political polity, that this race has been by all the nations of Europe regarded as subjects of capture or purchase, as subjects of commerce or traffic, and that the introduction of that race into every section of this country was not as members of a civil or political society, but as property in the strictest sense of the term." They're telling you right there that this race is a construct. It was created. They're telling you it was introduced, the introduction of this race in every section of this country. First and foremost, there were already melanated people here prior to the European colonists coming in. Right? To quote the great poet Nasir Jones, aka Nas, he said, "The problem is we started thinking like the colonists till Noble Drew Ali started dropping that consciousness." So you have to think about that. So they're letting you know that the Negro is a creation, it's a stamp, it's a mark. It was a term used to apply to property because the term Negro does not connect anyone to a land or a history. That's why Black history, when they always give you Black history, which was originally Negro history, if you look it up, it started out as being Negro History Week. Then it became Negro History Month and then Black History Month. So they only go back to slavery. Obviously, there's an existence of us as a people, melanated people, that existed before slavery. But the Negro doesn't have a history before slavery. Thus, the Negro The Negro, Black, Colored, African American, these are all created concepts applied in terms applied to a people to take away their nationality from them. This is very important to grasp. Very important to grasp. Think about it. Why did both justices make the distinction of Negroes of the African race, and what is its significance? Can Negroes be of other races? Were other races indigenous to Africa? Of course. Were any other Africans other than the ones called Negroes enslaved? What other Africans were sovereign during the late 1770s? What inhabitants of Africa were considered sovereign? When you look into history, you will see, again, I just referred to one of them, the Moors. If you deal with the Moorish Empire and the Moorish history, there's a book that I just picked up. And this is not to promote a religion. This is just to tell you that this is dealing with history. It's a book by two authors, Elizabeth Caldwell Hirschman and Donald N. Yates. It's called Jews and Muslims in British Colonial America, a genealogical history. A genealogical history. And I'll just read from an excerpt from the preface. It says, we, quote, we postulate that many of the initial colonists were of Sephardic Jewish and Muslim Moorish ancestry, usually arriving as crypto-Jews with their religious adherents disguised and crypto-Muslims. These immigrants served in prominent economic, political, financial, and social positions in all of the original colonies. Now, these were written by people of European descent. These weren't written by people who you would classify as white, not people who are classified as black. That's very interesting. You got to think about this for a moment. They're saying it. And the reason why I made it a point to speak on that is because when you look up the history of the Moors, you'll see that they were dark-skinned, melanated people. They look like me and you. The same Moors that you see back of old have the same phenotypes of the brothers and sisters today. So there is no coincidence. We are the same people. And there were many names used amongst them that incorporated with the indigenous people. There's a Delaware Moors that exists. That's a Native American tribe here in this country. And indigenous people here in this country. So it didn't just apply to people in the continent of Africa. We got to learn this history, family. It goes really deep. And unfortunately, I don't have a lot of time to go into it because it would take more than an hour. It would take probably 5 hours of me going into the records. But if you get a chance, get this book called Jews and Muslims in British Colonial America. And I'll be referring to this book from time to time because it actually gets into the last names, the surnames, where you can find that certain people who have certain surnames, they weren't slaves. Depending on the name, it gets deep, right? But we'll save that for another episode. But we're going to wrap it up. And before we do, we're going to take a brief pause for the cause, a commercial break. However, when we come back after the break, we will close out. And you are tuned into WDRB Media, the voice of the community, the only station giving you double the inspiration and information. Don't go anywhere because we will be right back.
Hayti Kwanzaa at the Hayti Heritage Center in Durham, North Carolina. Hayti Kwanzaa kicks off the week-long Kwanzaa festivities in the Raleigh-Durham area. Kwanzaa is a 7-day celebration based on Nguzu Saba, which is the 7 principles. And at the Haiti Heritage Center, there will be a host of events and activities for children as well as adults beginning on December 26th. Be sure to be there at the Haiti Heritage Center, where you will have a host of community activists and community groups such as Uplifting Humanity. Check us out at the Haiti Heritage Center. Go to haiti.org for more details.
Welcome back to WDRB Media, the voice of the community, and those streaming live through free TuneIn radio app and through iHeartRadio. You are listening to What is Your Nationality? And I'm your host, Shem L. I'm the author of several books, including What is the Devil Sometimes Called? And you can purchase that on my website, sheml.com, spelled SHEM-EL.com. Also, a few announcements. Again, to recap, be in tune for the upcoming 2022 First Social and Economic Conference in Durham, North Carolina, of which I'll be a chairman. We have all the speakers lined up for you. We are about to wrap up with getting our venue and securing a specific day and time. So be on the lookout for that, and you are all invited. Again, that's the First Social and Economic Conference of 2022 in Durham, North Carolina. Also, shout out to the Haiti Heritage Center, which is having their scheduled to have their annual Kwanzaa celebration. Kwanzaa is a 7-day celebration promoting the 7 principles, Nguzu Saba, starting from December 26th to January 1st. Also, at the Haiti Center scheduled for December 26th, they are set to have a host of events, activities. Hopefully, my nonprofit organization, which is Uplifting Humanity, will be in attendance and helping out, and definitely want to support that. Again, go to haiti.org for more details on that, and be sure to support them. With that said, I'm just wrapping up. If you're just tuning in, we're wrapping up on this show, and the title of this show is The New Dred Scott. The New Dred Scott, which is inspired by the title of The New Jim Crow, which is the title of a book written by Michelle Alexander, speaking on the prison system. And this here was inspired, this article was inspired, or I should say this episode was inspired by a recent article on a Missouri man who was exonerated and released from prison after serving 43 years for a crime he didn't commit. However, they would not compensate him due to the wrongful conviction over a legal technicality, which they would have, which I feel they would have normally overlooked if he was not classified as Black or African American. And we were showing the connections between him, that man, and another man in the past known as Dred Scott, from the famous Dred Scott case. And we went into the Dred Scott case. So I also went into the aspect of the fact that in historical law, even when you go into the slave codes, they makes a distinction between the term Negro, specifically Negro, and Negro, Black, colored, African American. Be clear, they are all the same in law. All of those terms, that's why I keep saying that, classified as Negro, Black, colored, and African American. Because when you go to the Federal Directive 15, right, which is the race and ethnic standards for federal statistics and administrative reporting, when they do the classification, Black is synonymous with African American, Negro, and colored. Okay. And the definition they have for Black is void of a national origin. All of the other definitions of the races that they have, they speak about the national origin, or another term they say is the origins in any of the original peoples. Origins in any of the original peoples. It doesn't say that with Black. It doesn't say in their law origins in any of the original peoples. It says Black, a person having origins in the Black racial groups of Africa. It doesn't state that it's original people. It doesn't state that it's a national origin. Okay? What they let you know? They letting you know that that is a classification, a construct. So we got to be clear on these things. And again, if you can, check out that book I talked about, Genealogical History, Jews and Muslims in British Colonial America, by Elizabeth Caldwell Hirschman and Donald N. Yates, which speaks about the history of Moors in the early Americas. Okay, remember I spoke about how I made a distinction in the South Carolina Negro law between the Negroes being the enslaved Africans and the Moors being the free inhabitants of Africa. That's due to the fact of the classification. You know, Moor, the term Moor was always associated with one who was free and noble. So I won't tarry on. I won't belabor the point. But however, I do want to thank you for tuning in. Thank everyone for tuning in. Continue to tune in every Sunday at 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Join us next week as we tackle another topic for another time. Please remember to connect with me. You can go to wdrbmedia.com. You can also download the iHeart Radio app. Click on WDRB Media, follow it, subscribe to it, and you'll be able to catch me every Sunday at 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Also, if you want to be a guest on the show and speak about nationality, you are welcome to do so. Contact me on my website, shemel.com. That's SHEM-EL.com. You have been listening to What is Your Nationality? And I'm your host, Shem L, on WDRB Media, the voice of the community, for double the information and inspiration. Until next week, continue to be blessed. And remember, nationality is the order of the day. And if you do nothing else, proclaim your nationality. Peace and love.
I got a birthright inheritance. Europeans don't want you to have an actuality. I'm an everlasting spirit personality, man. Soon to control elements whenever I balance my span. Nationality is precious for your national redemption. We come out of the dead sands gathered up at the entrance. Newcastle, it buses, lexical district number 1. It forced the Vienna Convention, the treaty up on these punks. According to the 805 Illinois Compound Statute, the Religious Corporation Act. If you don't know, you lack truth. The statute created the Morbid Science Temple charted that Shuali still issues by his signature. He brought us, accepted a straw man for value, therefore he redeemed mine. Talking about the corporate soul being conveyed, the lean dies. Prophet was brilliant, ladies. Michael, archangel, devils noticed, there was notice. They received a low grade blow, and then the beast had no understanding. The revelation spewed water at humanity. Amaras is the statement. I never would have thought it would be this way, to proclaim my nationality. I got a birthright inheritance. Europeans don't want you to have an actuality. I never would have thought it would be this way, to proclaim my nationality. I got a birthright inheritance. Europeans don't want you to have an actuality. Standing here, looking at my Moorish flag. Old glory, no story. Into the ground it goes back. Into the old north, west and southwest, and make some territory. No such thing as U.S. citizen, historical enforcement. Though everything is voluntary though. You're suffering by the buck and resolutions you don't dare to know. I'm rapping while I'm here to verify. 13, 14, 15, the amendment was never ratified. To my Black people, where your free national name was at? Cause attached with that, seemed like your own mental brain was snatched. Like Malcolm X told you many times, what was your heritage? Pick up a book and put down the alcoholic beverages, but don't stop it all at once. You get internally damaged, example, your lungs and kidneys while growing up on campus. It's time to get back to the national affairs of men. I'm talking business watched by action with self-accredited. I'm a citizen of the United States of America, but not a U.S. citizen. My life's embarrassing enough. This my political status. In order to evolve, members should conduct themselves by the Constitution and bylaws. Act 6 is to proclaim noble dualities pointed to by an amendment. Shoot is what I've been appointed to. The language of the 805 is key to the 1099. So just get behind the profit and corporation design, cause it's time, it's long. I never would have thought it would be this way, to proclaim my nationality. I got a birthright inheritance. Europeans don't want you to have an actuality. I never would have thought it would be this way, to proclaim my nationality. I got a birthright inheritance. Europeans don't want you to have an actuality. I never would have thought it would be this way, to proclaim my nationality. I got a birthright inheritance. Europeans don't want you to have an actuality. I never would have thought it would be this way, to proclaim my nationality. I got a birthright inheritance. Europeans don't want you to have an actuality. Another special thanks to Magic Tweets.
Haiti Kwanzaa at the Haiti Heritage Center in Durham, North Carolina. Haiti Kwanzaa kicks off the week-long Kwanzaa festivities in the Raleigh-Durham area. Kwanzaa is a 7-day celebration based on Nguzo Saba, which is the 7 principles. And at the Haiti Heritage Center, there will be a host of events and activities for children as well as adults beginning on December 26th. Be sure to be there at the Haiti Heritage Center, where you will have a host of community activists and community groups such as Uplifting Humanity. Check us out at the Haiti Heritage Center. Go to haiti.org for more details.